Alright guys, so today we're going to be doing 4l80e HD2 kit. So for those of you who don't know, I have a LS Swap Ranger and it has the 6-liter in it, and I have a triple turbo bed mounted setup. So I did have a single turbo up front before, truck made about 650 with the old 4l80, and I hurt the transmission. So I'm going to be doing a different HD2 kit. It's a completely different transmission, and I'm going to be doing kind of the upgraded or modified version of the Transgo kit. So I'm not going to be doing the pressure relief valve. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Let's just get into it. I do have another video doing the complete installation with the trans tore apart, because there's some steps in here where you can add some springs to the direct drum, and you add a different, like a thicker intermediate snap ring. I'm not going to be doing that because I'm not pulling the transmission apart. Like I said, this is a completely unopened transmission. I'm just going to do the necessary parts and not do the pressure relief valve. So what I mean by pressure relief valve is this little guy here. So on step 1, you start drilling a hole in the valve body, and then you make another hole here for the pressure relief. But the pressure relief valve can stick at times, and then you lose pressure and burns up the transmission. So it looks like this little guy here. So we're going to be skipping that step, not drilling the hole, not drilling the hole for the pressure relief, and I'm also going to drill the separator plate to a bigger size than I did before. So there's another step in here where you can select your diameter for shift firmness. So I'm going to do the largest shift firmness. I believe I did a smaller one on the previous build. So I'm going to have a firmer shift, not do pressure relief. I will put like an annotation or a link or whatever to the full HD2 kit install. This will be kind of just a refresher. Comes with instructions, comes with separator plate gaskets. It comes with a new separator plate that you're going to use. That is the intermediate snap ring. It's a little bit thicker than the factory snap ring that's in there. It has a new boost valve and sleeve, some new springs. These are direct drum springs if you were going to pull the transmission apart. Different accumulator springs, your pressure relief valve, and then there's some other springs that are going to go in the valve body there. And it does come with the drill bits and everything. So pretty cool, complete. Comes with a sticker. Stickers are always good. And then you have your new accumulator gasket. So some we're going to use, some parts we're not. Let's get started. First thing we're going to do is take the 17 bolts out to take the pan off. That's a 10mm bolt head. So we'll zip these off. So I'm just going to pull the pan and the gasket off. Oh, look at that oil pan. There is like no clutch material in this pan at all. That's pretty good. It's a good sign. Could be a bad sign though, if it was like flushed out and clean. So they could be lying to me on this one, but pretty happy about it so far, I guess. This transmission, I didn't really think that I smelt any burnt clutch material or anything like that, so I'm hoping that it's going to be a good one. Throw that off to the side. Next we're going to take the filter off. Filter you just kind of pull up and twist a little bit. And then we're going to start taking everything off. So you have wiring here, you have a wire harness, you have a pressure control solenoid, your torque converter solenoid, and then shift solenoids A and B, and then you have a plug here for this membrane switch. Take these off. There's going to be some clips holding the harness in. Take the bolts off, just kind of set it to the side. We're going to put all of these bolts back in, and we're going to take all of them out and then put them all back in. So kind of remember where they go. This one's a little bit tricky. You have a rear lubrication port. So pull this one off, take this little clip out. There's a little clip right here that holds this tube down. So you're going to need to take this tube out and just kind of shimmy it, and then the tube will come out. And then you can get the harness out of the way, and you have to do that to get to this bolt here. So we'll take the shift solenoid A and B plugs off, and then we can start taking all the rest of the valve body bolts out. And they're all the same length, so you don't really have to worry about it. The only difference is on this membrane switch, these are an 8mm head instead of a 10mm head. And pull this guy off. This is a little detent for your shift lever. So there you can kind of hear it release. You can hear when that last bolt comes out, the valve body kind of separates and you can hear the gasket and everything separate. So like I said, these are going to be around the same size, but they do have the 8mm head, so you know where they go on here. I'll just keep them separate in the pan. Then this membrane switch, don't pull it straight off because you can rip the membranes in there. So you want to twist it and then it'll come off. So here's what I'm talking about when I say membrane switch. So these little membranes, they're like little diaphragms in there. If you pull it straight off, there's like a suction and you can tear these. And then this thing, when you move your manual valve, when you move your shift lever, the fluid moves through the valve body and pushes on these membrane switches, and that's what activates the shift solenoids. So you don't want to rip those. All right, so now the valve body should come off. We'll want to be a little bit careful when we pull this off. I'm going to set this off to the side. So we're also going to be pulling this accumulator cover off to change those accumulator springs, but that'll be later. And you'll want to be careful in here, especially if you're doing this upside down with it in the vehicle. There's little check balls in here. There's little metal balls inside here, and it'll go through in the instructions. You're going to have to remove one of these check balls. So just keep that in mind if you're upside down. If this is in the vehicle when you're doing it, when you pull that valve body off, these check balls are going to fall out. So you want to just keep that in mind. Next we have the cover for the accumulators. So it is a 6 8mm head bolts. You can pull these off. Pull the cover out of the way. I'm going to leave the springs in here just like this, and then set it off to the side. These are going to be replaced, but this gasket and separator plate will come off. So there's 2 gaskets, one on each side, and the separator plate. So set this off to the side. I'm going to clean this up a little bit. There's a little filter in here, so be careful that doesn't fall out. I'm going to clean some of the oil out of here, and then we have a plug here with a spring that we're going to be doing, and then a filter and some stuff over here. So let me clean this and we'll get to the next steps. Next we're going to be pulling this little plug out. So there's a plug and some springs in there. I'm going to be using just like the skinny end of a rivet. I'm going to push this little pin out. Just like that. Sometimes they only want to come out one way, but now this thing should come out. Might need some persuasion. There. Sometimes you can hook the valve. I'm just sticking this pin in there, and sometimes you can hook the valve and push the valve out, and that'll get the other goodies to come with it. And then this valve, set these off to the side here, and then I'll clean this up a little bit more. So in the bottom left portion of the box, you have this little bag here. You're going to be looking for the 2 blue springs, this end plug, and then there's a little O-ring in there. So you put the O-ring on the end plug, and we're going to put the 2 springs and this end plug on with the threaded end out. Alright, so we got our valve here, the small spring, the bigger spring. We're going to put this in. And then we're going to put the plug in. Get the O-ring a little bit lubed up. Just put some fluid on it. We're going to do this with the threaded end to the outside. Alright, so push this in. I did have to stand it up and kind of tap on it a little bit. It's a little bit tough to get past the O-ring. But then we'll put this back in. And should be good for this one. Next, on the other side of the valve body by the shift solenoids, we do the same thing. We got another pin. Give it a couple taps. It'll come out. So this one, I'm going to make sure that I put my finger over again. This one you can actually get out from the manual valve port. So I'm going to pull the manual valve out, and then I'm going to get like a long push rod and actually work this filter out. Long screwdriver. I'm going to be careful with this one. There we go. Okay, so now that filter's out of there. So next what we need to do here is remove this O-ring off of the filter. And then what we're going to be doing is putting this little plug in there first. So this plug is going to go inside the hole. So it has like a little tapered end on it, and you want that tapered end to be out. And push that thing all the way in. It'll snap in with the O-ring. Then this filter is going to go in the hole, and the spring's going to go in, the orange spring. And then this is going to be the end cap. So this end cap's a little bit different. So this whole assembly is going to stick out farther, so the pin is going to go through the end cap instead of being on the outside of it. So we'll push this thing in as far as we can get it, and then if we can't actually push it in all the way, that's when we have to grind the filter, which it doesn't look like it, so we're gonna have to grind a little bit off of the filter to be able to get this thing in there. Here I'm just gonna take this over to the belt sander, and I'm just gonna sand the end of the filter. What that does now is it allows enough space for this end cap to suck in far enough to be able to put the pin through there. Put the plug in. I should almost be able to get it in there. I might have to take a little bit more off so I can get my rivet in. See if I can get the roll pin in there. So I'll have to take a little bit more off of it. Alright, so this one's all in and completed. I shaved a little bit more off that filter, put the cap in, put the roll pin in. Now that's done. Next steps 4 and 5 we're going to skip because that's for the pressure relief. So you're going to skip step 1, skip step 4, skip step 5. Next would be going to step 6, and this is where we're going to work on the separator plate. So it talks about shift firmness. So I'm going to be drilling it to 1/8. So there's some holes we got to drill in the separator plate. So let's do that. All right, next is going to be drilling the separator plate. So if you have the 2 holes on the top, the accumulator holes on the top here, and then this little end over on this side, there's 3 holes you're going to drill. I have them marked here. You can see I marked them with a marker a little bit bigger so I know where they are. There's 1 here, 1 here, 1 here. Reference the instructions. Take as much time as you need to figure out where those holes are, because there's a lot of little weird holes and stuff, and you want to figure out exactly where it goes. Mark it, and then I'm going to drill them out to 1/8. Okay, so now that the holes are drilled, I'm going to use some transmission assembly lube here. You don't have to use assembly lube, but anything that will help the gaskets kind of stick in place. So I'm just going to put it on in a couple different spots so the gasket will stick. And there's going to be 2 different gaskets. One is going to be complete like this, which is going to go on first, and then one is going to go on the top side. It's missing that section, but then you have a separate accumulator gasket that's going to go on in that spot. This I'm going to get lined up Make sure that it's okay. They talk about Z holes in the instructions. So there's a hole right here, which is an alignment. It's basically a bolt hole for the valve body, and then there's another bolt hole here to line up your gasket. Now I'm going to put this over the top in the same spot, and I can align the gasket with the valve body and the separator plate. All right. So now that that's aligned, I'm going to put the other gasket back on top. Kind of the same concept. Line the holes. And now you'll see why I put this assembly lube on there, because I want this to stick, but when I put the accumulator cover back on, it's going to hold the separator plate and the other gasket in place. This one is going to be kind of just free floating, and it could fall out. So I'm going to do that. And you have the other gasket that goes on here. Maybe put a little goober on this one too, just so it doesn't shift around when I'm putting the other stuff on. And then that is your gasket portion. Now I'm going to replace one of the accumulator springs. So you have your accumulator cover, the accumulator springs. I'm going to take the third accumulator spring out. I'm going to put this white spring in. So this other spring we're going to keep. 8 coils. And I'll flip this back over the top. Then we can put our other bolts in. So I'm going to get them all threaded, and then we can tighten them up. All right, so all those are tight now. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to skip number 7. I'm going to come back to that one later because that's inside the pump, so we're going to do that later. And I'm going to skip number 8 permanently. That is replacing the 4th bolt. It's like the overrun drum bolt. It holds the 4th and overrun drum into place, keeps it from spinning. So that bolt we're going to leave in there. The stock should be just fine. GM does a good job with their bolts most of the time. So we're going to pull this cover off and replace the 1-2 accumulator spring. And be careful with this, like pushing this down, because you'll launch a bunch of fluid out of here. Done it a couple times and it can be kind of annoying. So this will all come out. There is a gasket here. What we're going to do is take this spring and we're going to replace it with the other spring, and then we'll just put it back together. See how I'm pushing down on that, and that port there is pushing fluid out. So if you slam that down really fast, it'll squirt fluid all over you. Line the gasket back up, put this back over. We'll just tighten it up. Okay, so next is the check ball removal. So there's going to be 8 check balls. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So this one right over here by the 1-2 accumulator, we're going to pull that out. I'm just using a little magnet to pull it out. So we're going to remove that. That one's not going to go back in. So what I have here is like the whole boost valve setup and pressure relief spring setup. So this is going to come out of the pump. This end is going to go into the pump first. You have a retaining clip, snap ring, boost valve like sleeve or a bushing. So that's going to assemble this way. This washer is going to go on here. You have a green spring and a purple spring. Small one's going to go inside the big one. This will set up on here. And then this valve here is going to go on this way. So one addition that I'm making, and this one I pulled out of my old transmission, this is a Sonex line to lube valve. That's what it's called, line to lube. So you can see there's like some holes in there, and that'll relieve pressure between this portion of the valve. So what that is going to do is that's basically going to do this step. So instead of drilling this hole right here, this valve does the work. So that valve is like 50 bucks on eBay. You can add it and not have to do the pump drilling modification. But if you're going to pull everything else apart, you could just drill the hole in it and not have to pay the $50 for the valve. I already have it, so I'm going to use it. And that Sonex valve and that pump drilling mod will help a little bit with like surging and converter drag. So I had that issue and I replaced that valve and it helped me out a little bit. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to take this snap ring out. And I'll kind of take it out backwards, the opposite way, and I'll lay it down. All right, so I use my magnet and pull this other boost valve bushing out. Boost valve. And the washer. Springs. And then this is the factory valve. You can see it's the same type of valve. One of them just has a hole in it to bleed that pressure off. So then it's going to go back in the same way. Valve, springs, washer, and then the boost valve and the bushing, or sleeve, or whatever you want to call it. So this can be a little bit tricky to get this thing back in. And you got to push down on it and get that snap ring in. There we go. Must have been that spring was tweaked a little bit sideways. So I'm going to use the snap ring pliers. Just going to do that to push it down. Push that snap ring into place. And that's good to go. So that's pretty much it. Alrighty guys, so that's pretty much that for the kit. So everything from this point is just opposite of what we did when we took the valve body off. So putting the valve body on, putting the bolts in, do the wiring. One thing to keep in mind when you do put the valve body back on is this little portion here. This is for the shifter selector. This little knob here has to go inside this little groove on the manual valve. Otherwise, when you shift, it's not going to move the manual valve and you won't have any gears. So like that little detent switch will just be moving around right here and you won't be selecting gears. So that's happened to quite a few people. They put that back together, don't get the little tab inside there, and you have no gears when you put it back together. So the valve body is going to have to flip back over. That's why I put the goop on here to stick the gasket down so when you flip it over it doesn't fall off. That's pretty much it. So thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Have a good one.